when you have kids, the last thing you want is for them to ever have to go through anything painful or detrimental to them in any way. So when we found out that our Colin had Chiari, we were obviously pretty devastated. I had already been diagnosed with Chiari type 0 back in 2012 and Syringomyelia in 2011. But Colin, we hoped, didn't have that. However, the story of Colin is a little bit more complex than mine. Mine was going through just different random things over time since the 7th grade that you couldn't really pinpoint until later. However, Colin was 5 and just starting kindergarten. He hadn't started yet. He was about to. And we had taken his little brother, who was about 3 at the time, to have oral surgery. He had to have some teeth removed after falling and hitting his teeth. Anyhow, Colin, when we got home, had cried at the daycare from saying his neck hurt and he couldn't turn his head. So we weren't sure what happened there, but after he started throwing up, we were terrified that it was meningitis. He had a fever, he was vomiting, and it was just awful to see him try to turn his head and just tears would fall down his cheeks. So we decided we were going to go directly to the emergency room in the town, just the town over, because we don't have a hospital here in town. And when we got to the hospital, they decided to do a CT scan to check to see if it potentially was meningitis or something else. So when he went through the CT, they saw a mass in his brain, and it was at the base of his skull. And immediately when they said mass, I looked at Justin and he looked at me and I looked at the doctor and I said, "Is it Chiari?" And she looked at me like, "How the heck do you know what that is?" And I said, "I have that, so I need to know if potentially that's it, or are you thinking it's a tumor, or what is this?" And she said they couldn't confirm, they needed to do an MRI, and he needed to go to Dell Children's based on his symptoms at the time. They wanted him to go via ambulance. So I rode with him in the ambulance to Dell Children's in Austin, and they did the MRI the following day because they couldn't get him in, but he stayed the night. And the next day, after the MRI, it was confirmed he has Chiari Malformation. They also confirmed he has Syringomyelia, which extends from, in his case, C4 all the way down to T12, which is almost the entire length of his spine. Mine is from C4 to T5, just for reference. His is quite a bit longer than mine. His is also a lot wider within the spinal column. So it's a cyst, a fluid-filled cyst inside the spinal cord. And that's what Colin has. So after a lot of tears, a lot of frustration, we decided to go see a neurosurgeon pretty soon. And we saw Dr. Timothy George, who was a phenomenal neurosurgeon. Unfortunately, he passed away a couple of years ago, and we've really tried to get back on track with different neurosurgeons, but there's never going to be another Dr. George. So that was a tough revelation for us. But Dr. George talked us through everything and what our options were, and ultimately the option for Colin to ensure that something like this hadn't happened or wouldn't happen again. The headaches and all of that weren't guaranteed to not happen again, but we knew it was pretty emergent considering how severe his symptoms had become. So with him, in September of 2018, we went ahead and did brain surgery. That he had a decompression surgery where they remove a piece of the skull to give his brain, his cerebellum, and specifically his cerebellar tonsils, some room. This is something that we know may have to happen again as he grows to determine whether or not he needs more of it removed to help not have the pressure. He does get headaches still, so we're not sure, but we will have an appointment soon to figure that out. But ultimately, it did show improvement in the year. We did an MRI after a year, and it did show significant improvement. So we were hoping for 50%, and it was about that whenever we went back for our follow-up with Dr. George just before he passed away. So the year update was really good news for us. And the time since then, he has just had a few headaches here and there, and he does get tired sometimes, but ultimately he's doing really well, and he's excited that he can do jumpy castles now because that wasn't something he could do previously right after surgery. So it's been a journey for us. It continues to be a journey. Like I said, we have a follow-up appointment sometime soon, in the next month or two, to find out how he's doing several years post-surgery. We may have to do a follow-up MRI just to make sure he's doing well. He does have visual loss in one of his eyes, not necessarily related to Chiari, but potentially can be to an extent. We're just not sure. So anyway, that's our Colin story. There's a lot more to it, but I wanted to keep it as short as possible so that you guys could kind of get an idea of what it's like for the children's side of Chiari and Syringomyelia. And in my case, I haven't had surgery. In Colin's case, he has. So that's one difference within us, and we do have differing symptoms. And each person with Chiari and Syringomyelia and related conditions have different symptoms. Not everybody is the same. It's kind of like a snowflake. Everybody's unique in their different symptoms and what they go through every day. So that's one thing to keep in mind. If you have a friend or family member that has Chiari or Syringomyelia, we're not all the same. We don't have the same symptoms, and one person's pain could be completely different than the other. And it is a chronic condition. There is no cure. So that's why we do things like these events, like Unite at Night, and this virtual event that we're doing here Labor Day weekend, just so that we can get the word out and let everybody know what these conditions are and how they impact others. So hopefully you guys learn a lot over this weekend and help spread the word, and keep in mind if you have any similar symptoms, you might want to get checked out, have your kiddos checked out, but just continue to keep in mind that these conditions do exist, and the chances are you may know somebody that has them, and either they don't know or they'll be diagnosed later in life. I was close to 30 when I was diagnosed, so you can either be 5 like my son or close to 30 like me, and each person will be different. But I encourage you to continue to learn about Chiari, Syringomyelia, Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, hydrocephalus, tethered cord, all of these different conditions that are really related to one another, because it'll help you understand kind of what folks like Colin and I go through on a daily basis, and hopefully it helps. Thanks for listening, and hope you learn a whole lot this week. Thanks, or weekend. Thank you. Have a good one.